Virginia.
Earlier on, I spoke to Jason Blazakis, a senior research fellow at the Soufan Centre, a global security research group. I asked him for his response to the sentencing.
I think it's an appropriate measure of justice for the horrific actions that Shafee Sheikh was engaged in, that your reporter touched on, being known as the cruelest guard amongst the so-called Beatles, waterboarding, electrocuting prisoners, forcing them to fight each other. 8 lifelong consecutive sentences is what he deserved, and it's in keeping with the United Kingdom and U.S. arrangement that Sheikh and Koti would not face the death penalty in the United States. So given his horrific activities, today is a measure of justice, but like Diane Foley said, it is something in terms of ringing a little hollow.
It's been a long time coming, bringing these men to justice. Talk us through some of the complications in this case.
Well, first and foremost, geography. Sheikh and Koti were operating out of Syria until they were captured, so actually getting the hands on them to bring them to justice was difficult. Second, the United States system, as you know, has the death penalty, so the United States and the United Kingdom had to negotiate around that. And then thirdly, it's collecting information in a difficult place like Syria and Iraq and using it, essentially battlefield evidence, in a U.S. court system, also very difficult to do.
He said he's appealing. Is that likely to be successful, do you think?
No, it's very unlikely to be successful. It's very clear the charges against Koti and Sheikh were both very warranted. So I think Sheikh is certainly going to live the rest of his years behind bars, very likely at an administrative maximum prison in a place like Florence, Colorado.
You've spent your career studying Islamist terrorism. Were these men true jihadists, would you say?
Well, these are individuals who first and foremost were criminals engaged in petty theft before they joined ISIS in 2012 and 2013. And they used religion, the ISIS brand of religion, to practice their brutality and their nihilism. And they really do represent the Beatles, a microcosm of what ISIS was, a brutal terrorist group that engaged in wanton forms of violence.
You say what ISIS was. Once upon a time, the Islamic State group were in the headlines nearly every day. We hear less about them nowadays. What risk do they pose at the moment?
Well, they still pose a significant risk, but they are not the zenith that they were in 2014 or 15 when they had their so-called caliphate. It was the equivalent size of Great Britain. The United Nations actually just really issued a report in July of 2022 documenting how much impact ISIS still has on the ground in places like Africa and in Afghanistan, where the ISIS Khorasan group operates with impunity because the Taliban can't control them, and in Africa in places like Congo and Mozambique. And in fact, ISIS senior leaders are calling for the establishment of a caliphate in Africa. So we have to keep our eye on the group. It's a group that remains relevant, unfortunately.